It's the final race before Formula One's summer break, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Hungary, with its tight technical corners and unforgiving layout, is not just a battleground for drivers, but for engineers, strategists, and aerodynamicists desperately chasing answers. It's the moment of truth for every team, still clinging to hopes of salvaging their 2025 campaign, or at least making sense of their chaotic season before shifting full throttle toward 2026. For Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, Haas, and others, Budapest has become the final testing ground for crucial upgrades. This isn't just about pace, it's about momentum, because once the lights go out at the Hungary, there's no turning back. Ferrari enters this weekend on the back of a performance that was quietly encouraging. At Spa-Francorchamps, the much-anticipated rear suspension upgrade finally made its debut, and the results were noticeably, if not explosive. Charles Leclerc, ever the technician behind the wheel, secured a podium while executing a race free of any lift and coast measures, a sign that Ferrari's previous struggles with energy deployment and tire management may finally be improving. Even more telling was the fact that the car allowed both Leclerc and Hamilton to push without falling off the performance cliff. This wasn't raw speed, it was stability, consistency, and for Ferrari, that's progress. But the Italian team isn't stopping there. According to credible sources close to Maranello, Ferrari's bringing a final batch of intricate aero parts to Hungary, most notably new underfloor elements designed to work in harmony with the updated suspension. These tweaks are expected to unlock more downforce, allowing for a lower ride height that could be pivotal around Budapest's twisty layout. Ferrari has long suffered from inconsistent performance in low-speed corners, drivers struggling to rotate the car smoothly through hairpins and chicane. These new updates could be the solution, giving the SF25 better mechanical grip and allowing both Hamilton and Leclerc to attack apexes with more confidence. If it works, it changes the game not just for this race, but potentially for Ferrari's trajectory heading into the next development cycle. It's a moment that demands precision, courage, and a bit of risk-taking, something Ferrari hasn't always been known for in recent years. But if they can make this final upgrade package click in Budapest, it might just be the statement they've been searching for all season. Because in modern F1, it's not just about having a fast car, it's about making the right improvements at the right time. And for Ferrari, time is running out. While Ferrari looks to unlock untapped potential, Mercedes finds itself facing a crisis of identity. The W16 was a winner in Canada just a few races ago, and yet, in Belgium, it fell completely flat. A team that once set the gold standard for engineering excellence is now grappling with inconsistency that borders on the inexplicable. George Russell managed to scrape together a respectable P5 at Spa, but the car's lack of balance was painfully obvious. It struggled with traction out of corners, unpredictability under braking, and an aerodynamic profile that refused to cooperate in variable weather. More troubling still was Kimi Antonelli's performance, or lack thereof. 2 Q1 exits, 0 points, and a weekend that offered no answers. Inside the Brackley factory, there's a growing realization: something is fundamentally broken. The car's behavior isn't just track-dependent, it's erratic. On some weekends, the W16 looks like a threat. On others, it's clumsy, disconnected, and slow. This kind of unpredictability hints at a mechanical flaw, not just an aero one. That's why both Antonelli and Russell returned to base after Spa for intense debriefs and simulator work. There's even talk of reverting back to Primula suspension, specs to run back-to-back comparisons in Budapest, just to find some kind of baseline again. Hungary represents more than just a final chance before the break, it's a litmus test. Mercedes needs to know whether the car has potential that can be unlocked, or whether they're dealing with a flawed concept from the ground up. That's why they're bringing what's rumored to be a final batch of upgrades, possibly involving modifications to the floor or upper bodywork. It's not just about chasing lap time anymore. It's about understanding why this car behaves like a completely different machine from one circuit to the next. For Antonelli, the pressure is especially intense. Hungary is a technical track that rewards precision and control qualities. It has in spades, but only if the car gives him the platform to perform. This weekend isn't just another race. It could be the moment he either turns the narrative around or watches his rookie season spiral further into frustration. And for Mercedes as a whole, Budapest could either validate months of hard work or force them to make difficult calls before 2026 development becomes the full-time priority. Either way, the W16 will be under the microscope. Red Bull arrives in Budapest with momentum but also with questions. Spa-Francorchamps was supposed to be a statement weekend, a massive upgrade package, bold changes across the board, and the perfect chance to silence any whispers about declining dominance. On paper, the RB21 received tweaks to the front wing, side pod inlets, engine cover, front suspension, and rear corner, but in practice, the results were inconclusive. Max Verstappen won the sprint and salvaged a P4 in the main Grand Prix, but there was no immediate leap forward in performance. And while the team insisted the sprint format limited their ability to optimize the new package, some observers couldn't help but wonder, has Red Bull finally hit a ceiling? Yuki Tsunoda, who received the new underfloor that Max had been testing for weeks, showed signs of promise. He made it into Q3 and qualified 7th, his best result yet with the team. But, as always, Sunday told a different story. Tsunoda's setup leaned heavily toward wet weather downforce, and a late call to switch to slicks proved costly. He slipped back through the field and finished outside the points once again. It was a frustrating result, but not an one. Tsunoda finally seems more at ease with the new floor design, and if the remaining upgrades are installed on his car in time for Hungary, he could be poised to deliver his strongest performance of the season. That's exactly what Red Bull needs right now, not just dominance from Verstappen, but meaningful support from the second car. Budapest presents a golden opportunity. The Hungaroring's high downforce layout suits the RB21's strengths, and if the upgrades begin to gel, Red Bull could reassert themselves against the rapidly improving and make no mistake, McLaren's recent form has Red Bull watching their mirrors. Behind the scenes, the shakeup in team leadership is still reverberating through Milton Keynes. A mid-season team principal change might not affect the car directly, but it adds pressure to deliver results and validate the current development direction. Verstappen, as always, remains clinical, fast, focused, and unflinching, but even he can't drag a misfiring car to consistent victories. That's why Hungary is so important. If Red Bull can dial in the latest package, especially on a traditional race weekend without the complications of a sprint format, they could close the gap and re-establish their edge. However, if performance remains flat, it could raise uncomfortable questions about their 2025 development philosophy and even hint at trouble ahead for 2026. Hungary is not just about points, it's about clarity. Red Bull needs confirmation that their upgrades are moving the car in the right direction. Otherwise, the psychological edge they've enjoyed over the grid could begin to erode outside the top-tier teams. The fight in the midfield is more brutal and more consequential than ever. Every upgrade matters, every setup change carries weight, and every mistake can mean the difference between scoring points or finishing anonymous. For Sauber and Haas, Budapest isn't just another round. It's a battleground where small gains could lead to massive championship implications. Let's start with Sauber. At Spa, they delivered what could be called one of their most complete weekends of the season. Gabriel Bortoleto brought home 2 valuable points with a P9 finish, while Nico Hülkenberg managed P12 on a weekend where strategic missteps elsewhere opened the door for midfield climbers. But what really stood out was the car itself. The 2025 Sauber, despite running a relatively low-drag setup, was able to maintain enough downforce to hold its own through corners and still punch down straights. That level of aerodynamic efficiency is no accident. It's the result of a development path that's slowly but surely moving the team forward. Heading into Hungary, Sauber is expected to bring another wave of upgrades. Details remain under wraps, but there's confidence within the garage that whatever's coming will build on recent gains. Historically, Sauber hasn't had the luxury of throwing endless updates at the car, but this season, almost every change they've introduced has worked. That's not luck. That's engineering discipline. And in Budapest, with its slower corners and unforgiving layout, Sauber's ability to fine-tune their mechanical grip and mid-corner stability could be the key to another points-paying result. They're still outsiders in the midfield war, but they're no longer invisible. Then there's Haas, a team that's been dancing on the edge of a breakthrough all season. Spa was a missed opportunity. Both cars had genuine point-scoring potential, but poorly timed strategy calls, particularly the decision to switch to slicks in tricky conditions, left them empty-handed. Ali Bearman finished P11, while Esteban Ocon faded to P15 after a two-stop strategy that never really came alive. It was a classic Haas weekend, flashes of promise undercut by execution flaws, but it wasn't all bad news. The recent upgrades have done exactly what the team hoped: reduced high-speed bouncing, improved low-speed responsiveness, and generally given the drivers a car that's easier to predict. Now, heading to Hungary, Haas is rolling out even more targeted updates. Confirmed sources say they'll be changing the rear corner and redesigning the engine cover too. Better manage airflow at the back of the car. These changes aim to unlock better rear-end stability, critical for a circuit like Budapest, where traction out of slow corners can define an entire lap. Haas currently sits P9 in the Constructors' Championship, but the gap to P6 is just 8 points in a field this tight. One good weekend could change everything, and if the new parts work as intended, Budapest could be their launchpad. The question isn't whether Haas has the potential, it's whether they can finally string together a complete weekend when it matters most. While the spotlight shines on Ferrari's and Mercedes' crisis, and Red Bull's battle to stay on top, the stories in the shadows may prove just as critical. McLaren and Williams, two teams with completely different philosophies, this season are arriving in Hungary with contrasting intentions, but both with something to prove. McLaren, for its part, is done. At least, that's what team principal Andrea Stella says. Their 2025 upgrade plan is complete. The major packages have already been deployed, and the team's full attention is now on the 2026 regulation overhaul. But just because the big upgrades are over doesn't mean they've gone idle. There are still tweaks happening under the surface. Rumors suggest McLaren is evaluating a front suspension change, one that Oscar Piastri may test to gather more data. It's unclear whether this is part of a larger plan, or simply a probe into future setup directions, but what's certain is that McLaren is using these final few races to sharpen the blade. This makes sense. Their pace has been strong, their trajectory upward, but in a sport where stagnation equals falling behind, even the slightest lack of development can be costly. If McLaren has truly shifted focus to 2026, Hungary becomes less about raw results and more about data collection, driver comfort, and closing out 2025 on a high. If they're lucky, the changes they're testing now could carry strategic benefits into next year's development race. Williams, on the other hand, is in a different kind of push. At Spa, they introduced one of the most aggressive upgrade packages in recent memory sidepod inlets. Floor edges, floor fences, engine cover adjustments, the kind of comprehensive evolution you only see when a team believes it's finally turned a corner. And for Alexander Albon, the results spoke volumes. He qualified P5, finished P6, and demonstrated that the FW45 has genuine midfield pace. Crucially, the car didn't just go fast, it stayed reliable. That's something Williams has struggled with all year, especially with cooling issues that often force them to compromise performance. Now, they're not bringing any new parts to Budapest, but they've made it clear, the optimization phase is in full swing. The upgrades are on the car. The focus now is on understanding how to get the most from them. The team believes there's still performance left on the table setup details. Tire behavior, fuel loads, data analysis, and that if they get it right in Hungary, they can firmly entrench themselves as the top midfield contender. It's not flashy, but it's smart. And in Formula One, smart often beats bold. So as we arrive at the Hungaroring, what we're witnessing isn't just the final pre-break Grand Prix, the culmination of months of work, the last throw of the dice for teams hoping to extract every ounce of performance before shifting gears toward 2026. Some are gambling big, others are playing the long game. But every single team on the grid knows this. The margins are respin, the competition unforgiving, and in Budapest, there is no hiding from the truth. The upgrades are here. Now it's time to see who actually got it right. If you found this breakdown valuable, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment with your thoughts. Which team do you think nailed their upgrades? Who's bluffing, and who's quietly setting themselves up for the future? Let's talk about it. Because in Formula One, the story never stops, it only evolves.